Did you know that originally the idea was for Wade and Ember not to be a couple? I mean, they would still be a romantic pair, but there would be a third element in this equation. A handsome, muscular fire guy who would compete with Wade for Ember's heart. He would be named Dante. And Bernie, Ember's father, would make a big effort for him and his daughter to start a relationship since he doesn't like water people, and Wade is included in this group. But the production team ended up thinking that the idea wouldn't engage the audience as much and ended up dropping it. Lucky for Wade in this case, as the path was clear for him. This is just one of the 11 curiosities that no one knows about Disney's Elemental that we're going to tell you now. The fire neighborhood houses are inspired by Mongolian kettles. To give the movie an oriental touch, we found that the production of Elemental drew inspiration from various cool details, and the houses of the fire people in the neighborhood were inspired by a very beautiful and rare utensil, Mongolian kettles. Unlike regular kettles, they are true works of art and have a more rounded shape. Some of them are made of metal, but others are made of ceramics. And if you look closely, you can see that the houses of the fire people in Element City are made from one of these two materials, as this is the only way to prevent the houses from catching fire all the time. A very cool cultural insight. The origin of the blue flame. In addition to the shape of the fire people's houses, another feature of the film based on the East is the blue flame itself. It represents the culture and practices of the Oriental people who migrated to various parts of the world and preserved much of their customs and habits, preserving their identity. But it also draws inspiration from a mystical element of Japanese culture. It's called hitodama. In China, the same element exists and is called guifo. It is a blue fireball that represents the human soul in its essence, showing the supernatural side of life that continues even after there is no physical body, which is very important, as in some places, Orientals have the custom of venerating their ancestors. You can even see hitodamas in various Japanese animes to demonstrate how prevalent this concept is there. Elemental is pure culture. Each element demonstrates anger in a different way. Anyone who watched Elemental certainly noticed that when Ember got angry, she would simply burn everything near her. And not only that, if you look closely, you'll see that she always changed color when she got angry. And the color she turned indicates the hottest type of fire there is, violet, which means that the fire she is emitting can reach up to 1500 degrees Celsius. We can assume that all fire people do this when they are very angry. As for air people like Gale, Wade's boss, when they get angry, their cloud colors darken and they start emitting small lightning bolts. We didn't have the opportunity to see earth and water people very angry in the movie, but it's likely that each of them has a very different way of expressing their anger. You can identify your passion's love by smell. Ember's mother is the official matchmaker in the fire neighborhood of Element City, and for this, she uses her sense of smell, which according to her, never fails. The fact is that absurd as it may seem, many living beings on the planet use their sense of smell to choose their life partners. And for this, these beings release a substance of love called pheromones. It has not been scientifically proven that humans can also release this love aroma, but there are studies trying to determine if it really exists among us. But the fact is that the inhabitants of Element City are not humans, so Cinder can simply be sensing, through her gift, a real aroma that is released when two people, even from different elements, are in love, as is the case with Ember and Wade. And an interesting detail, at the beginning of the relationship between Ember and Wade, Cinder didn't feel anything. That only happened after Ember was truly in love with Wade, even though she said she wasn't. So we can say that Cinder can only smell this on fire people, which in this case is their smoke. But that's more than enough. But if you're thinking you might have an enticing scent, until studies prove otherwise, keep taking showers and using perfume for everybody's sake. Wade would have been completely different. As a fan of animated movies, you may have heard that some characters were originally conceived to be different. Among the characters of Elemental, the one who would have been the most different is Wade, because the idea was for him to be a bit chubbier in the film. We can see this in the official art book of the film, where you can see the alternative designs of various characters. Of course, the Wade we see in the film is not an excellent athlete, like some of us thought he would be at the beginning of the movie. Another version of Wade showed him to be the opposite, slim with a more tapered face. This film's story is based on real events. Calm down, we're not saying that there was actually a firewoman who fell in love with a water guy in the real world, at least not that we know of. But Elemental was certainly inspired by real events, because many people tend to forget, but the truth is that the Disney movie begins by addressing the issue of immigration and how it is a difficult and complicated process, as we saw in Bernie, Cinder, and even Ember many years later. And this has everything to do with the life of the film's director, Peter Sohn, who is the son of Korean immigrants who moved to the United States before he was born, just like Bernie and Ember. But in addition, the film also deals with another real and controversial issue that is also linked to Peter's life: love between people people of different ethnicities, as we can say that Wade and Ember would be representative of different ethnicities in the real world, and Peter Sohn ended up dating and marrying a woman of Caucasian ethnicity, and despite possible difficulties, they form a united and happy couple, proving that this is certainly not a barrier to true love. It's cheesy, but it's true. Fire elementals can feel cold too. This one is more of a curiosity. When Bernie and Cinder arrive by boat from the Fire Country to Element City, we see that he covers her with a coat because she indicates that she's feeling cold. What's completely ironic is that they are literally living flames, so feeling cold shouldn't be possible for this group of elementals, but it's an interesting detail that we noticed and thought you should know. Fire Neighborhood Pioneers. Another very interesting thing in the elemental universe is that Bernie and Cinder were practically pioneer immigrants from the Fireland to arrive in Element City. If they weren't the first two fire people to arrive, they were certainly among the first, which demonstrates the level of courage the couple had and their determination to make such a dangerous journey with the primary purpose of giving a better life to their daughter, who was on the way. There are some signs that prove this pioneering we just mentioned. One of them is the fact that when they arrived, they were the only fire people in the immigration hall they entered shortly after arriving at the city's port. Similarly, when they arrive at the location that would become the store, we see that at the moment the place was completely lifeless and empty, unlike the present days where we see fire people walking in all directions, some of them with their children and babies. Furthermore, we see that there is no one older than Bernie and Cinder in the fire neighborhood, because they were probably the first. The only older person we see in the movie who is older than them is Ember's grandmother, who simply fades away on her deathbed. Another indication that they were the first is the fact that this was so uncommon that Bernie's own father didn't accept it when it happened, to the point of not returning his respectful greeting. We can say that they were part of the pioneer group of fire people in the city that previously had only 3 elementals. In the official art concept book of the film, we see a drawing of a boat full of fire people, very different from Bernie and Ember's boat, which basically only had the 2 of them, which only reinforces the idea that they were among the first. Air people have a different way of taking care of their children. Right at the beginning of the movie, we see Bernie and Cinder arriving in Element City, and when they are looking at the grandeur of the city and everything in it, we see a kind of airship being deflated. And at that moment, if you look closely, you'll see a mother coming out of the transport with a crying baby. But there's a very curious detail. She's pulling him on a kind of leash. You can even hear the baby crying. It may seem strange at first glance, but if you think about it, it makes sense. When air people are born, they can simply float up to the sky. And if no one holds them, even if the mother holds the baby in her arms, if it's not fastened, it can simply float away. This also indicates that they learn to better control whether they float or walk after a certain age. So in this case, that safety harness that looks like a leash seems to be the safest option for the child not to disappear. Each element has its own means of transportation. No, we're not talking about transportation within Element City, but rather about means of transportation used for longer trips. We can see, for example, that water people travel by submarine, as it is a completely safe means for them. Air people use a kind of airship, which they inflate and deflate as they board and disembark. Earth people travel in regular wooden boats, and fire people also travel by boat, but they are made of iron, because otherwise the boat would catch fire and they would be extinguished by the water. These were the 11 amazing curiosities of Elemental that I'm sure you didn't know. But wait, there's more! We've selected these videos because we're sure you'll enjoy them. Just click and continue your fun journey.